That's a good question. I mean, it seems to me that, first of all, education should also help develop our attention. And, you know, as I said before, the poetic means, first of all, to be able to be mindful of the symbolic, sacramental nature of reality, to see that things are beautiful, for example. Just, you know, how often do we just raise our eyes and look at the clouds? You know, I mean, that education should make us more attentive. That's by definition. So that's the way you kind of introduce a poetic spirit, because then you look at things with that kind of attitude. I think that's all we can say.
I think that this is a really important question for me because but you, for example, Carlo, you're a professor of math. And if I understand it correctly, like math and physics. I teach sociology, but also philosophy and theology. But one way of including the poetic, I would say, I co-taught a seminar last year on engineering and beauty, right? People often separate out technical knowledge or scientific knowledge from the beautiful or from the poetic. And I think that that's not really the case, right? What's really, and you've written about this, Carlo, what's really the driver of scientific innovation? You wrote an article, I forget in what magazine, arguing that scientific innovation isn't the result of experimental science. That helps, but ultimately the driver of scientific innovation is human creativity. Didn't you write that, Carlo?
No, I would say attraction. I mean, people must be attracted to the beauty of the world to study it. If the world was not beautiful, we would not be interested in finding out the laws of physics or other fields of science. I mean, it seems to me that it's easier to respond to the question in the negative by saying that the real scourge of education is utilitarianism, if you wish, in the sense the idea that education can only work if it makes you able to get a job, or of course you need to get a job, you need to make a living, but ultimately, if you narrow the goal to such limited usefulness, nobody will try anything new, right? Because in order to risk and to try to explore different fields, do something that may not work, doing something that may not produce an immediate return, you need to have a bigger desire. You know, you have to be a bigger attraction. So in some sense, even to introduce you to the work, to introduce young people to the sphere of work in the utilitarian sense, you need to introduce them to a broader sphere. You know, they have to be introduced to a passion for every aspect of life, for art, for poetry, history, literature. If you have this kind of general passion for reality, then you're going to be able to look at one detail and really do a good job. But if you give up on the totality in some sense, if you give up on the big picture, if you give up on the attraction, on the fact that you're attracted to life, that life is interesting, and you just try to learn one skill, you probably are not going to do a very good job even with that one skill, you know, because context is everything. So, yeah, that's what I would say.
Well, I would also just say, building on that, Carlo, through my work with engineers at Princeton, as well as with engineers at the University of Colorado, there has been a revived interest on the poetic, you could call it, dimension of the human person in science and engineering education. Precisely because the purely pragmatic model, which seems to fit the sciences so well, doesn't always fit because it doesn't quite fit the human person. So yes, we need to learn the methods and we need to be able to measure inputs and outputs. But what you're saying is that scientists also need to be driven by passion. And how do you stimulate passion and stimulate creativity if you don't pay attention to the poetic dimension of the person? So having engineering or science students read biography, read great literature, read great poetry is a way of stimulating the passion that then drives what they're doing when they're practicing science, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. And also in their own field to emphasize the search for beauty and truth, because people who, the great physicists, the great mathematicians, they always love what they did because of the beauty that they discover. And if you kind of eliminate that aspect, at the end of the day, science itself will suffer a lot.
Well, I would just point our readers to an article I published in Scientific American on engineering and beauty. And there I refer to a book by Gallant from, oh gosh, I'm forgetting the name, but it's quotes from scientists about the importance of beauty and inspiring them in their scientific achievements, including someone like Albert Einstein, who is so well known here in Princeton.
Yes, I wrote something along those lines in Church Life Journal last year.
That's right. That's the article. So yes, look for Carlo's article in Church Life Journal as well.